Thank you so much, guys. Can everyone hear me well? Yeah. Okay, good. So my name is Aida. I'm a spatial experience designer, and if you don't know what that is, me neither. I'm just kidding. But we will talk about it today. And today, I wanted to talk about the art of spatial storytelling. But before I do, I really want to tell you a little bit story about myself. So that's me. I was born in 1997 in a city called Tehran and in a country called Iran. And ever since I was very young, I knew I loved art. I was drawing, I was painting. And my first ever art teacher in elementary school told my parents that I guess I had talent in art, so she asked them to sign me up in her extracurricular classes. So I was going, from a very young age, I was doing drawing, painting, art, and I was going to exhibitions with my best friend. And we just loved to creatively express ourselves in any way we could. But as I got a little bit older, I realized that as a young woman in Iran, it was getting harder and harder to express myself creatively. So let me explain that. If you're familiar, 18 years before I was born, in 1979, something really major happened in Iran, and that was the Islamic Revolution. So for some people, like my parents' generation, they went through Iran pre- and post-revolution, but for someone like me, I only experienced Iran after the revolution. So that means I never experienced an Iran where women were on cover of magazines and women could go outside wearing whatever they wanted and could sing in public and dance and just truly be themselves. But instead, I was raised in a country where women couldn't sing, they couldn't wear whatever they wanted, they were forced to wear hijab, and they couldn't even go to a stadium to celebrate their favorite football team. And they couldn't even appear in movies without wearing hijab. And on top of that, even if I wanted to get creativity sources from internet and social media, I couldn't do that either because they were all censored. So there was, of course, VPN and everything like that, but the internet speed was way too low. And as far as media goes, the national TV of Iran had very limited channels, and those channels were highly regulated and controlled by the government. So again, couldn't really find any sources of inspiration there either. So, but there was this one channel, and there was this guy who was a film expert. He was the host, and he would bring other film experts, and they would sit down and they would talk about a movie, an entire episode, and they would analyze it in detail. And this became a source of joy and inspiration for so many people. And I happen to know this person personally because that's my dad. So you see, my dad is what you would call a film buff. So he is a film addict. I mean, he has seen any movie, any classical movie you can think about. I grew up around these movies. He's retired now, but he was a film professor. A lot of very famous directors and filmmakers of Iran now used to be his students. So he has also written and translated many, many books about cinema. So you can just imagine, I grew up around books and movies. And speaking of books, there was an annual book expo in Tehran, and he would take me every year, and he told me that I could pick a few books that I wanted, and he would buy them for me. And one year, we both picked this book, which is Wizard of Oz, the Farsi translation of it. And I remember I absolutely loved this book because it was actually a pop-up book, and it was so visually beautiful. But I think what really stood out to me was the story itself. So the story is about a little girl called Dorothy, and Dorothy feels very misunderstood in her environment, and she dreams of another place where she can be herself, express herself, and where her dreams would come true. And I think as a little girl growing up in Iran, this really resonated with me. And this was one of the first times that I experienced emotion with a story. And that is the power of storytelling. So a good story is a personal one. It's something you can relate to, and it evokes emotion. And that's exactly why I just told you a story about myself, because I'm a stranger. You guys don't know me, so for you to trust me to take an hour or two of your time, I want you to care, just simply care, and be engaged and be emotionally invested. And that's exactly what a story does. Mr. Rogers once said, "There isn't anyone you couldn't learn to love once you heard their story." But a good story also has structure. So if you've ever taken a writing class, English class, you're probably familiar with this. So the hero's journey is a formula used in many, many stories that we've heard ever since we were kids. So basically it starts with the hero in their ordinary world, and then there will be a call to adventure. At first they refuse the call, but then they meet their mentor and they start their path towards the special world. So now they're crossing the first threshold, and on their path they meet friends, they meet enemies, they have challenges, and then slowly they go to the inmost cave and the supreme ordeal, something very big happens, and then there's a reward. Then they start the road back, they start the return, there's a resurrection, and at the end they return with the elixir. So let me give you an example. Let's go back to our story of Wizard of Oz. So the hero here is Dorothy. Her ordinary world is Kansas, and everything is normal until one day her dog Toto escapes, and that is her call to adventure. Now this is where the change is happening. And at first she's confused, she's frightened, she's not sure what she should be doing, but eventually she meets Glinda. Glinda is her mentor, and slowly she starts crossing the threshold, and she goes down the yellow brick road. And here she starts meeting friends, but also enemies. So the friends are the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion. And the enemy, of course, is the Wicked Witch of the West. So the group prepares for their final challenge, and Dorothy and her friends confront the Wicked Witch. The reward is that she defeats the Wicked Witch of the West by accident. And the road back starts when she's finally given an opportunity to return home by clicking her ruby slippers together 3 times. Then there is a resurrection, so now she is a changed person, she has learned lessons. So now it's time to return home, so she's back in Kansas with her family, and she learns that even though the adventure was magical, the love and safety of home is the greatest gift of all. So this formula is something that we've all seen growing up in a lot of the movies and books. But I'm here to say stories are not just in movies and books. Stories are everywhere. And every day. So today when you woke up and you decided on an outfit, you are telling a story with your outfit. And then maybe you opened up Spotify and you chose a song. And I'm guessing you chose that song because it tells a story you like or you can relate to and it's personal. So maybe it's telling your story. And maybe today you took a lunch break with your friend and you did a little gossip session, so you were telling a story. Or maybe this past weekend you took a trip to IKEA. So now you might be like, wait, that didn't make sense. What do you mean? You lost me there. So let me explain. Yes, when you go to IKEA, you are part of a story. So let's go back to the hero's journey formula. So now the hero is you, and you are in your ordinary world, you are at home, and you are on your uncomfortable desk chair, and you decide, okay, I have to go to IKEA and I have to find a chair. But first you're like, is it worth it? It's expensive, I don't wanna go, I don't wanna spend the money. But then you meet your mentor, so you're looking up reviews and you're asking friends for advice, or maybe you go to IKEA and you find a helpful salesperson. And then you finally decide, okay, I'm gonna go to IKEA, and you're in the furniture section. So it's not that easy. You have to test out a bunch of good chairs and bad chairs. But you finally find it, and now there's a bigger challenge. So you have to go through this labyrinth of IKEA's warehouse to find it, but you do find it, and that's your reward. And now you go to checkout and you take it home. But there's another challenge. Now you have to put it together. There's a few hiccups, but eventually you do it. And there's a return with the elixir, and that is that now you're home in your brand new chair and you feel ultimate comfort and satisfaction. So you've conquered this quest, and now you have the perfect chair and your life is improved forever. So yes, you can tell stories through spaces. And I actually remember the first time I realized that you could tell stories through spaces. Let's go back to my story. So as I said, the national TV in Iran had very limited channels, so a lot of families started buying satellite dishes and they would put it on their rooftop. And by the way, we had to be very careful with this. It was very risky because you could get caught. Technically, it was illegal, but somehow it worked for us. And finally, I had access to all this Western media. And I was so excited, and my favorite channel, of course, was MTV. And I remember I would come back from school every day, and I would turn on MTV, and they were showing my favorite show, and that was Room Raiders. So if you don't know what Room Raiders is, Room Raiders was a dating show where each episode there would be 3 contestants, and there was another person who potentially would pick one of these people to date. And the way they would choose the person to date is that they would go to their rooms one by one and inspect everything carefully and blindly choose someone to date. So there were no pictures of them, nothing. It was only based on their room. And this was so fascinating to me. I thought, how can you choose someone to date if you've never seen them and you're only choosing them based on their room? And now looking back, this makes perfect sense to me. I mean, what better way to get to know someone's story than their room? You can see all the trophies they won, and that's how you realize they are into sports. You can see if they play an instrument. You can see all the posters of their favorite musician, all the pictures of all the travelings they've done, who their friends are, what is their taste. Everything you need to know is there in that room. So this was the first time I realized spatial storytelling can sell you on a brand. In this case, I'm talking about a person's brand, a person's identity, but this also works with commercial brands. And that is the exact reason why you might choose Trader Joe's over Vons. Let me explain. So Trader Joe's tells a completely different story than Vons. So first of all, it's small. It has a local feel. It feels like a local market. It has an island theme. There's a theme to it. There is a quirky decor. There are playful graphics everywhere. There's hand-drawn signs. The packaging are so beautiful and unique. And sometimes I even buy a product and I'm eating breakfast and I see this really funny message on the packaging, and that makes me smile. And my favorite, limited selection. So what I mean by that is, if I want to buy ketchup and I go to Trader Joe's, there's one ketchup, and it's the Trader Joe's brand. But if I go to Vons, this is my nightmare. I don't want 25 brands of ketchup, I just want one. So very early on, for years, brands have recognized the power of storytelling by allowing their consumers to experience it. So this leads to a whole entire field, and that is called experiential marketing. If you've never heard this term before, if you Google experiential marketing, this is what you get. Experiential marketing is a marketing strategy that creates unique, memorable experiences for customers. It's also known as engagement or event marketing. But let me make it very simple for you. So just think about advertising and marketing and just trying to sell a brand. You've seen this in so many different ways. You've seen it in 2D form on a billboard. You've seen it in a commercial on TV, on a poster at the metro, or an Instagram ad. But you've also seen this. You've seen pop-ups, and that's exactly what experiential marketing is. And you might have also gone to a convention or a trade show or branded exhibition. So although you might have never heard the term experiential marketing, you have definitely come across it and experienced it. And a lot of people think this is a very new field. That's actually not true. If you look at the history of experiential marketing, it goes all the way back to Chicago's World Fair in 1893. So this was a fair where a lot of new products were introduced. So the Ferris wheel was introduced here, the elevator and the zipper, but also a lot of brands that we know and love today, they were introduced on this day. So Cracker Jacks, KitchenAid, which wasn't known as KitchenAid at the time, but it's interesting because the brand representatives were there to demonstrate their brand new dishwasher. So this is the early stages of product demonstration. Aunt Jemima, what we know of now as this brand, their brand representatives were there making pancakes in front of people and also giving free samples. Wrigley's fruit juice, a lot of you guys know. William Wrigley, the owner, he was personally giving out Wrigley's juicy fruit to people. Also early signs of free sampling. So if you think about these tactics, product demonstrations and free sampling, these are very simple ways of experiential marketing, because when you give someone your product to try, you are asking them to experience it by themselves. And then in the 1920s, auto shows got more and more popular. This is where a lot of car brands realized that if you sell a car in a museum setting, it increases the sales. And then in 1936, we have the Wienermobile. So Oscar Mayer, his nephew actually came up with this idea. He said, what if we have a vehicle in shape of a hot dog and we just hire recent college grads and we're gonna call them hot doggers. And the hot doggers will go around and they will give out these whistles in the shape of a hot dog, a Wienermobile. And then in the 1980s, we have guerrilla marketing. If you're not familiar with guerrilla marketing, it's basically advertising a brand in a very surprising and unexpected way. So you can see some examples of that. And then around the same time, we have mobile marketing tours, and this is really inspired by the Wienermobile, but now Fortune 500 brands are doing it, going around in a tour bus and advertising their brand. And then in the 2000s, slowly we have viral marketing. Social media is a thing now. Social media is still a very important part of experiential marketing. And then slowly we have immersive brand experiences and pop-ups. And this is really what I do for a living. But how did I get into experiential design? I know that as a student, there's a lot of hows. You're always wondering, oh, how did you do that? How did you get into that? So I will explain. So as I was saying, I got to a point in Iran where I felt like as a young woman, I couldn't really have a career in art. So me and my family realized it was time to immigrate. So we did, thanks to my family. And I started at Cal State Long Beach as an industrial design major, actually. And I did all the all-nighters, but I also made amazing friends. And I loved my industrial design days here, took really cool classes, learned a lot. But then one day I came across this opportunity, and that was an internship at this company called Gallagher. And what they did is they made stages for festivals and concerts. And this was the first time I realized I really liked designing spatially. And what was really fascinating to me is that whenever we were designing a set for a specific artist, that set was telling that artist's story by itself. So a set that you would design for Billie Eilish, for example, would be a totally different look and feel than another set that we did, for example, for Smashing Pumpkins. So, according to their music and their story and what the artist wanted to communicate through their set, these designs would change, and that concept by itself was so interesting to me. So at this point, I I said to myself, this is what I want to do. I want to do maybe set design or something spatial. And I told my professors, and I was like, what do I do? And everyone said, go to Wesley. So I went to Wesley, and he actually recommended that I take classes in the theater department, and I did. I took a couple of set design classes, and then I helped a grad student in the theater department with the production of cabaret. So that was a good experience. And Wesley said, you can also take my exhibition class. So this is where I slowly decided to transition to the BA major because I was finally able to take environmental design classes, exhibition classes, and all those classes that I was very interested in. And in this class, we had one project where Wesley gave us the freedom to choose a brand, and then we had to design an exhibition booth for it. And I was just watching a lot of Netflix at the time, so I chose Netflix, and the first thing that I did is I researched the brand. I went on their website, and I saw the slogan, "See what's next," a lot, so that kind of started telling the story to me that, okay, this is a brand that is really focusing on future, so how can I bring that futuristic look through materials and forms and activities. So, you can see my process through all the sketches. I finally came up with this design. And then one of the other things that we did in this class is that Wesley took us to George P. Johnson, which was my first ever experiential marketing agency that I ever stepped into. And I love this day because we got to hear from designers and see what they do. And I didn't know what experiential marketing was at the time. So I was hearing from all these designers about how they turn these brand stories into spaces, and that was so fascinating to me. And so it was always in the back of my mind. And then a little bit later, Wesley told us that they were hiring an intern. So I applied and I got the job. And this was a great experience. I started in the Honda and Acura account. And at the time, we were designing the Honda booth at the LA Auto Show. And Ryan, who was my supervisor at the time, he designed this beautiful booth, and it was so fascinating to help him visualize this and just see his process and see how he can take the brand's ask and turn it into a space. So I remember one of the things they wanted was, we want a space that is bright and optimistic, and you can see that's exactly what he did. And then March 2020 happened, so just everything kind of went down. I lost my internship, of course, and I didn't have an in-person graduation. This is when I graduated, and I didn't even have an in-person grad show. And, I was in a field where it has to do with events, and the events were in person, so it was also hard to find a job. So, slowly things got better. I eventually did have an in-person graduation with my friends. And in this time, I also picked up a few freelance jobs. So these are some of the things I did at this time. So the one on the left is a post-Grammys party, and I designed this bar experience for them. On the right, I worked with this agency called Vita Modus, and we designed a station for Fox Sports in Doha, Qatar, for the FIFA World Cup 2022. And this is where they would broadcast all the events and the shows. And I really love this project. I got to help with the visualization and a little bit of the design. And because it was in an Arab country and I grew up with Islamic architecture, it was a very interesting project for me. And I also did a bunch of virtual exhibitions because, yes, that was a thing during COVID. So now a lot of brands knew that they couldn't have in-person events, so they started having virtual exhibitions, and I got to do that a little bit as well. But as time went on, I slowly realized I wanted to go back to school because I thought that I needed to learn more about this field. So I decided to go to ArtCenter. And when I decided to get my master's, I was looking at my options, and there were a lot of architecture programs, interior architecture, interior design, and that's just not something that I wanted. I wanted experiential design, and my choices were very limited, just very limited programs doing this. So I'm lucky that I found ArtCenter here in LA, and I did Master of Science in Spatial Experience Design. And I think ArtCenter was a great opportunity for me, because here is when I think a lot of my technical skills, like modeling and rendering and all of that, really improved. But that's not it. I think what I really took away the most from ArtCenter is how to tell a brand story, everything that I'm talking about today, how to design an experience that is impactful and engaging, how to research a brand, and also how to be able to show your idea. So not just come up with the idea, but how can you communicate it through speaking, through renderings, and everything like that. And one of the best things I did at ArtCenter is I spent part of my time in Berlin, and I was studying abroad there. And I always say this trip changed me as a designer, because I had a professor, and he would always encourage us every day at 5 p.m. in the studio. He would say, close your laptop, go outside. And that was so important, because I think you guys can probably relate as design students. We get into this mindset of, let me just finish this, and you stay in the studio and you work and you just, you do all-nighters. And, I think internet has a lot of great sources of inspiration. Like there's Pinterest and there's websites, but there's nothing like going outside and getting inspired by things that are outside. So whether it's shows, concerts, exhibitions, galleries, a conversation with a stranger. And one of the things that really helped me was Berlin had this culture of having really high quality posters everywhere, and they were free and they were accessible. So every time I was going to shows or a restaurant or anywhere, I started collecting magazines and brochures, and I started collaging. And why I love collaging is that if you look into Dadaism and Dada artists, what they would do is the same thing. They would take newspapers and they would just see what they could find, and they would just put it together without thinking way too much about it. And I think that's something that I used to do, is I would just think too much about things and try to design this perfect thing. And collages help you be imperfect and just experiment a little bit more. And that was so important for me, and I do think that really changed my style after that. So went back to LA, had a few semesters left. I finished my program, but I want to share with you what I learned at ArtCenter. So why experiences? Why experiential design? Why is it important? So a book that I really like, and I brought it here so you guys can look at it after, is Design and Storytelling by Ellen Lupton. And in it, she says, an experience stirs emotions and generates memories. It embraces dramatic action, sensory engagement, temporal interaction with users. During an experience, users create meanings and associations that become more important than the event itself. And I love that she brings up sensory engagement. She has another book only on how to engage senses on just using design. And I want to talk about that because a lot of times when we think about design, we immediately think about aesthetics and how things look like. But a good design reaches beyond vision, and it engages all of your senses. So a good design is something you don't just see it, you also touch it, you can smell it, you can hear it. And then I wanted to talk about, so how do we do that? How do we engage the senses? How can we create an engaging experience? There's multiple ways. I'm going to talk about a few. So lighting, material, texture, use of technology, color, pre-experience, post-experience, using interactive engagements and other things. So I'm gonna do this using examples of my own work. So these are all conceptual projects that I've done at ArtCenter. So for this particular project, it was a space where I wanted to explore being social and starting conversations with strangers, but also being able to have time to yourself. And I thought, how can I do that through lighting? And I researched that, and I realized warm lighting scientifically makes people want to start a conversation. So most of my space, I decided it was going to have warm lighting, but then I wanted to have few areas with cold lighting because I didn't want people to get overwhelmed. I wanted them to have moments by themselves and relax. In the same project, I used technology. So this was an art gallery, and I decided to design this interactive table where after everyone was done with all the paintings, they could sit down at the table on this interactive screen, and they could swipe through it and look at all the paintings they've seen that night. But then they could use AI, and they could collaborate with the artist. Now they could change the art as well. Texture, same project. Any chance to have moments for people to have a tactile experience is very meaningful, and it adds to the experience. Material. This is a concept project that I did for Vespa, and the way I approached the material strategy is I came up with 3 words. So I looked at Vespa products, and I looked at their guidelines, looked at their website, and I came up with classy, fresh, fun. And you can see they have products associated with each of these. So then I took those 3 words, and I came up with materials for each of those. So classy materials that are older, like marble, walnut, leather. Fresh materials that are a little bit newer, so like terrazzo, for example. And then fun, translucent materials, colorful materials, powder-coated ceramic tiles, things like that. And then I went a step further, and I made a physical material palette, and that really helps you to really see your vision and how everything comes together. In the same project, my color strategy, so a little bit about this project, the brand strategy for this space was I wanted to encourage both young generation and old generation to go and buy Vespas. So to do that, I wanted to show a contrast of generations through colors. So I used neutral colors for the older generation, and I started bringing in fun and colorful colors to represent the younger generation. And the reason I went with the mint color, the mint is a very popular color for Vespa, and through research I found out that it was actually inspired by a mint latte in Italy, and that's how it became very popular for Vespa. So what do I mean by pre-experience? So in experiential design, you're not only designing the experience itself, but you're also thinking about what's happening before. How do I get people to go to this space? So for this project, for example, I thought about graphic strategy, but then again, I wanted to show that contrast between the 2 target groups that I was going for. So the younger generation would get Instagram ads, whereas for the very committed Vespa owners, I wanted this just very custom invitation letter that they would receive at their home. And then for the post experience, this is also very important. When people leave your experience, how will they keep remembering this experience and think about it? So for this, for example, I came up with this latte stencil in the shape of a Vespa that every time you would make a latte at home, you could remember this experience. And interactive engagement, this is another concept project that I did, and this is the interactive engagement I had here. So the way this works is, this was a restaurant, and there was a track that went through the restaurant, and people could grab spheres from this pool, and they could put it on the track, and they had chips So in a way that as soon as they would put it on the track, it would start making a noise. So what were those noises? Each sphere had a specific instrument. So when you put 4 spheres at the same time, now you are making a song. So let me show you how that works. So the idea is that this is my mock-up. First, you prepare them, you light them up, in a way charge them, and this is random because there's a whole pool of them. So you never know what music you're gonna go for, what kind of combination. And then this is how this works. So you can see this is the first instrument. So now the next instrument is introduced. The third one. So now you have the entire song, and you can do so many different songs because you can make so many different combinations. So that's a way of doing an interactive engagement. How can you have people be part of this experience and interact with it? So those are mostly conceptual projects, and I love conceptual projects because there's no budget. But let's talk about a little bit of my experience in the real world after I got my master's. So I want to talk about this project I did with an agency called NVE, and it was for Liquid IV. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. They sell these hydration sticks, and they were going to sponsor F1 Miami, and they wanted us to create an experience for them. I think the reason I'm talking about this one in particular and why I'm very interested in it is this was a very good challenge because now you're not only telling Liquid IV story, you also are telling F1 story, and you're also telling the story of Miami because the location itself plays such a big part in this. So as soon as we got into creative direction, we knew that we wanted the look and feel of this be very Miami, very tropical, very vibrant, very exhilarating. And it just happened that the color palette for F1 Miami matched the color palette for Liquid IV, so I just thought that was a good accident. I was the experiential designer on this project. It was a pretty small team, actually. But me and the other creators got together, and everyone came up with ideas. I remember we ended up having like 30, 40 ideas, and then from there, we went into 10, and then we chose 3 to present to the client, and then finally, we came up with this one. So at the core of it, what we wanted was for the audience to experience what it's like to be an F1 driver. So one of the things I love about being in this industry is I'm always learning about new things that I never knew about. So I never knew anything about F1, and now I know all these fun facts. But what we learned is that F1 is not just about speed. It's actually a lot about teamwork, and it's about this entire team behind the driver who are designing the car and also like repairing it and all of those. So we looked into F1 pit crews, the people who repair the car, and we looked at F1 garages, and we wanted to recreate that, and we called it the Liquid IV garage. And the other thing we wanted to incorporate is the F1 lights. I'm sure maybe you've seen it on TV, where the F1 driver has to be very quick with their reaction to the lights, so they have to push the gas immediately. So we wanted people to experience that. So this is the overall experience. It was a garage, very simple design. One of the things the client asked for was they wanted some sort of maybe iPad where people could fill out a questionnaire and they would be using that information for their own purposes and statistics. So the way we did that is the first step in this experience is you meet with the crew and you fill out the questionnaire on the iPad. Then you move on to the game, which is the reaction game. See how quick you can react to the fun lights. And then you get rewarded for that, and at the end, you get rewarded with a liquid IV stick, and then you step out. So this is a perspective look of it, and you can see we really had fun with little details from F1. So the fans, the utility cabinet, the liquid IV branded tires, and everything like that. But then we also designed another experience for the ground floor, and this was the race experience. So now, how can we have the audience experience being being a fun driver and what it feels like to race? So the first step here was they would stand in line, and then there was information about a little bit of a debrief about racing and how this works out and how do F1 drivers prepare for a race. And then there was a chance for them to cool down, because during our research, we found out that that's something that F1 drivers actually do. Right before they start, they cool down. And then number 4, here is where they could pick up a helmet, and it was liquid IV branded. And the helmet was attached to a tube, and the tube was attached to a disposable water bottle that they could just then take home. So the reason we did this is we did some research about how do F1 drivers hydrate, because liquid IV is all about hydration. So we wanted to find the common ground, see how the story can work out. And we found out that F1 drivers have a tube attached to their helmet, and they can press a button whenever they're thirsty, and that's how they hydrate. So we created that experience for the audience. So then they are wearing this helmet, and when they go to race, and then on this racing simulators, they are also hydrating using liquid IV sticks. And at the end, they can see their scores just like a real game. So this is the front view of it. So the debrief, then the cool down with the fans. You gear up, pick up your helmet, and sit down and race, and then you see the results. Just to show you the real life image, those are the helmets I'm talking about. A reason why we were giving out disposable water bottles. Well, one, any chance you can take for swag, that's great for experiential marketing, but 2, sanitary reasons. we wanted them to just take the tools with them so the next person can use another one. So this was a really successful event, and there are ways to know that. There's a whole team of people that their job is to understand how successful the event was and how it actually helped with the sales and everything else. So there's quantity and then there's quality. Like, as far as quality goes, I could see the influencers posting about it, and I could see a lot of engagement on social media, so that's already great. But then as far as actual numbers go, we found out that 1,421 guests attended, and we distributed 27,600 sticks and 3,000 drink samples. We gave away around 2,500 swag items over 3 days. So then I want to talk about another really fun project, and I did this one during my time at my current company, Impact XM. So this was for the company called Nongshim, and they sell ramen noodles. So the ask was, they came to us and they were going to have an experience in KCC, Korean Culture Center in New York, and they wanted people to be familiarized with Korean culture, but also have an opportunity to try the noodle for themselves. So we started thinking about what is a Korean experience that we can bring, and started looking into touristy things that people do in Seoul. And one of them we realized was people go to the Han River, and there's a tradition apparently with the Han River, and that is there are convenience stores all around it, and people go and pick their ramen, and then there are stations where they can actually cook it. And then they go to the picnic table and they enjoy it. So we wanted to recreate exactly that. So My colleague, Portia, she actually was the environmental designer on this, but then she brought me in to help her figure out the experience and the journey before we get into environment and actually designing the space. So I actually start like this a lot of times. It's very simple, just a few words, a graphic that helps me understand what is the experience, what do you do first, and then what is the next experience. And then from there, we go a little bit more detailed, start actually building the experience 3D, and this helps us understand the experience a little bit better. And then I also put together an inspiration mood board, so I want to understand what is the overall mood, what is the color we're going for, inspiration. So I looked into a lot of Korean convenience stores, so we were inspired by that, but we were also inspired by some of the grocery store activations that I could find, and we got inspired by that as well. We wanted something that would create a photo opportunity, something that was engaging and interactive and meaningful, but also just fun to be around. So this ended up being the experience. So you go in this space and there are videos of the Han River on these LED screens, and then you go, and this is the convenience store. You pick up your ramen, and you can cook it here. There's a fridge. You can add on anything you like. And then from there, this was the experience in real life. Also very successful. You could see on social media, people really enjoyed it, and that always makes me so happy. That's one of my favorite things about this field is how quickly things come together, whereas in architecture, you have to wait a long time. But with experiential design, you can see what you made on the screen in real life very fast. So what am I working on now? So as a lot of you know, there has been very devastating fires in LA, and I live in LA. And when these started happening, of course, my heart was just so heavy, and I was just thinking about all these families that lost their homes, and I was thinking about different ways that I could help. And then one day on social media, I came across this organization called Design for Disaster. And this is a brand new organization. Jessie started it, and she's also an ArtCenter alumni. And she wanted to bring together designers from every field: product design, interior design, UX, graphic, anything. And basically, we would have these meetings, and we started having project leads. So a few of us started pitching ideas. How can we improve the situation for these families through design? And so I was one of the project leads, and I came up with this idea of a modular play zone for children at the shelters. Because a week before that, I had gone to shelters to volunteer, and I saw a lot of children with these families, and they looked confused. They didn't know what was going on. This was very emotionally challenging for them, but also they had nothing to do. They were bored in a way. They wanted something to do and keep busy, and they needed a way for their spirits to be lifted. So I came up with this idea of these interactive modular play zones. So the way this works is there is a shelf that goes against the wall, and that's so that we can save some space at the beginning. And then the children can go and grab these modular cubes, and they can put it together and use it in different ways. So for example, they can make tables and chairs with it and sit down and draw. Or they can make these play mazes and crawl on top of it, or they can make a spatial collage. So what do I mean by that? So this is how it works. They are in the storage, they grab it, they put it down. And then the idea is that these cubes are not boring, like just wood or just a simple material. They are going to be colorful, and they would have illustrations on them. So the children will be making 3D collages in a way, and I brought my mock-up so you guys can play with it. Feel free to make your own collages and see how this works. So yeah, this would be a great way for children to be engaged and encourage them to express themselves creatively. And also wanted to say I am looking for volunteers to help me with this project. You can do a good deed, but also I know as a student, you're always looking for portfolio pieces, and this will be a great one, I think. And I'm so excited. I started posting this on social media, and it grabbed a lot of attention, and I'm very grateful that people see this vision, and so many creative people have reached out to me. So I have a little team, but I would like to grow my team because we do need a lot of help. So if you're interested, email me. I know this room is full of creative people. So let's just summarize everything I just said. So spatial storytelling, in conclusion, it allows brands to engage audiences in a deeper, more immersive way. It evokes emotion, inspires imagination, and creates lasting connection. Enhances brand identity and leaves a lasting impression. And it's an essential tool for communication, marketing, and design. And before I close out the lecture, I want to talk about how do I get my inspiration, and what is my advice for you guys to get your inspiration. As I was saying with my experience with Berlin, I started realizing that going on Pinterest isn't enough, so sometimes it's better to go outside and experience things. I saw this video that was saying, as an artist, you have to go through a couple of bad jobs, and you have to go through just life experiences, maybe boring ones, because you cannot create anything inspirational and moving if you don't experience life. So whatever that means for you, traveling, going to galleries, talking to a stranger. Today, before I came here, I went to the dog park with my dog, and I had an hour conversation with a stranger about coffee. But turns out he's retired now, but he used to be in the coffee business, and I love that conversation. Maybe I should have prepared for my lecture instead. But what I'm trying to say is be open to going out, and I'm not saying don't do your homework, do your homework, but get out of the studio sometimes and go outside. I always say Pinterest is outside, and also don't let having no one to go with stop you. I know a lot of us miss out on stuff because we can't find anyone to go to a gallery with, or go to movies, or travel. Go alone, go to the theater alone, travel alone, and go to that gallery alone, make it happen. And one thing I started doing is I started archiving my inspiration on Instagram. So I thought, why not? It's a nice layout, but also maybe other people can take advantage of it. So this is my personal Pinterest. Everywhere I go, everywhere I travel, galleries, I put it in Aida spaces, and then I recently started another one because, as you know, I love film. So every time I see an inspirational production design, set design, art direction, I instantly put it there because I want to go back to my personal Pinterest and look at all my inspiration. And I wanted to close out with this quote. It says, "After nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing that we need most in the world." And before we go into Q&A, I also wanted to say, one of the things that helped me the most in this journey was having great mentors. So I'm very lucky that I still talk to some of my professors here and ArtCenter, and some of my past supervisors. One of them is here to support me. Two of them, actually. And also the friends that I made along the way. So I would love to be that for you. So if you need help, if you're interested in this field, just message me on LinkedIn, or look at my website, or email me. So thank you.